Hi, welcome to Tales of Dread. Tonight we have some true horror stories for you of military personnel encountering cryptids. So enjoy and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. This is my first post on this sub, so go easy on me before I start my story. I've been a lurker for a long time, but I think it's finally time to tell my story. I'm a male late 30s. I'm also an officer in the military. 3 times, I've been sent to Iraq. I have also done a few tours of duty in Afghanistan. I don't get scared easily, and because of that, I'm pretty aware of my surroundings. This has helped me see things that most people can't. I don't know if it's because I've been in combat or if this is just how my life is. Anyhow, I'm from Flagstaff, Arizona, and I lived there full-time until very recently. When I was younger, the older people in my community told me that skinwalkers were evil witches who could change into animals, especially coyotes, deer, and wolves. Some American Indian areas believe that these animals are holy. So, people believe that when someone becomes a skinwalker, they give up their humanity forever for the sake of dark magic. I never gave these stories much thought until I was about 19 and a friend and I went to Sedona, Arizona, for the weekend. We chose to spend the night in a building that had been left empty on top of one of the red rocks. When we used to go urban exploring a long time ago, it was just wide enough for all 4 of us to fit. This is our first mistake, and it happened right before I left for boot camp. We couldn't get enough of the show Urban Exploration. I'm not sure if this is really urban exploration, though. We all woke up around 5 a.m. when we heard coyotes howling and growling outside the building. I'm not sure what made us stay, but after a few minutes it sounded like they were getting closer and much more aggressive. Then, we decided to leave quickly, but as we were leaving, we noticed that something was following us. I don't really know how to think about it. I'm not even sure if it was a skinwalker, but we felt that we were in danger. It felt like we weren't welcome there, like we were breaking the rules in some way, if that makes any sense. My friends and I all ran back to the car, but they kept following us. We finally got rid of them. After getting off the main road, drive on some side roads until you get back to the main road. I'm still not sure if this was a skinwalker or not, but I do know that my friends and I were so scared when we got back to the hotel. My friend says he really did see eyes, golden eyes. I don't know what it is, but I know it's something bad. We felt like we didn't belong there and like we were in danger the whole morning. Even after we left. At first, my friend thought he was just daydreaming, or had a panic attack. He says that later on, he felt like something was following him and that he was being watched wherever he went. He still thinks that it followed him back to Arizona after we left. After that, I was stationed in Yuma and he was in Flagstaff. He says that people are now looking out for him. I am a Marine stationed on Maine's Mount Desert Island. I have been stationed here for nearly 3 years now. I've always liked being there. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and when I was almost 21, I joined the Marines. This area is so different from where I come from. It seems like the perfect way to show my appreciation for America, and all its beauty. What's weird about this job, though, is that it kind of ruins your other jobs and ways of life because being a Marine is so different. After this, everything else seems so boring, whether we were deployed or back home on vacation. Anyway, the wildlife here is one thing that really gets to me. Not just some of it, but all of it. It makes me wonder what's out there, if you know what I mean. Look, I know this may sound like a cliché, but the only thing most of these animals have in common with us is that they live on Earth. In contrast to what I'm about to tell you. It makes me think that some weird things that happened here last year were pretty bad on their own. There were a lot of strange things happening. It's hard to remember everything now that a few things stand out. The first thing that really stood out was that our patrol unit saw a figure moving near the wood line on a very clear night. We knew there were no other units out there in that position. So we all thought it might have been a big buck and kept on with our patrol without giving it any more thought. But one of our own, Lance Corporal Cray, decided to look into the movement since we had extra time before we had to go back to base. He was gone for a few seconds before we heard gunshots coming from where he had gone to check. We all got scared and ran over to help him, imagining that the worst had happened. As we got closer, however, our radios picked up Cray yelling at us to stay away. He told us to call the base and get a helicopter there as soon as possible. He said that something was after him, so we had to call for help. Surprisingly, one base did hear us, and they sent a whole helicopter there right away. We came up with some ideas, but he was pretty scared. He told us it wasn't a deer like he first thought, but more like a wolf-like creature that was bigger than any wolf I've ever heard of. He told us that it walked upright and had the face of a dog and teeth like a big saber-toothed cat. He said that this thing's eyes looked like dark, hot coals. Even though many of us didn't believe him, we thought he was playing a joke on us and doing a great job acting. He seemed pretty shaken up and traumatized by it. And this wasn't a man who liked to talk nonsense. He was never a jokester. In fact, Cray was a very serious and strict type of person. I don't even think the man has ever laughed in his life. You know, one of those kind of guys. So it was upsetting that this happened to him. That wasn't the last patrol of the year, but it wasn't far behind. We were going back to our base. I had just finished my morning patrol in the woods when I heard this sound, which seemed to be hanging in the air. It was a strange, mechanical buzzing that sounded like something was coming toward me, so I quickly hid in the bushes, but nothing came. I then got back on my way to base. The sound kept coming, and it sounded like it was coming from everywhere, but I could never figure out what it was. This went on for about 20 minutes until it stopped. I really do sometimes wonder if it isn't aliens after all. I'd never seen it before I was stationed here. Still, they're just stories, right? Someone might be messing with us or pulling a joke on us. These things just can't be true, can they? I was a mechanic in the military for a while, and I also did a short stint in military intelligence. What I'm about to tell you is a true story that happened about 20 years ago. I was part of a small crew that took care of and fixed all the military vehicles and machines in our battalion. We had just finished our weekly maintenance checks on all of our vehicles when we heard from one of our forward operating bases, also called FOBS, that some strange things were going on nearby. A few of our men who were watching the mountainside. They just found out that some enemy soldiers are trying to set up a base camp in the area. The mountains near the FOB have so many caves and thick forests that it's almost impossible to see into them without getting close enough to. One of the men who was on patrol told us that we could get close enough to one of these caves. Apparently he had seen some strange-looking figures inside. What he thought were enemy soldiers were actually spies or something very different. He was afraid and ran away, leaving his squad behind. We ended up getting a few of us together and taking our best sniper and all of our gear with us. We're going to do a thorough check of the perimeter and take care of any people who might be fighting. We took all the necessary safety measures and planned our attack accordingly. We went up to where the men on patrol said they saw these people because we thought it might have been them. We could get very close without getting caught. It was pitch black. We saw them for the first time at that time, but they were moving slowly in a circle. They seemed like big, hairy people. They were naked and as heavy as a grizzly bear. They had cone-shaped heads, no necks, and huge, broad shoulders. The place itself was scary. Then we realized they weren't enemy soldiers and weren't even people. They were doing something. We didn't understand. We were scared by what we saw, and we all agreed that we were looking at Bigfoot creatures. At this point, we decided to leave the area before getting involved with these things. My sniper friend had taken the safety off his gun and was ready to shoot. I got in his way. We watched them for as long as we could before deciding to leave and tell someone else. When we told our leaders what we had seen, they said that the cave where we had seen these things needed to be looked into more. They sent more men to the area we had already looked at. They didn't seem to have found anything. They also checked out the area around the cave and the cave itself. The only other stories I've heard about these creatures are from my Air Force trained friends who told me about big, hairy animals in the woods. I always thought it was just a joke until I went through it. When my brother and I were kids, my dad used to tell us this story. It was by far the scariest one he ever told. This was the one he always told. When he came home from one of his many deployments out of state, he told us the same stories over and over again. This was partly because he was too lazy to come up with new ones, and partly because it scared us to sleep almost every time. Now that I'm a lot older, the story is more interesting to me than scary. Even though I have never once doubted its truth, it has led me to believe and look for things that used to make me want to hide and wet my bed. Dad is now retired from the military, and like most other military men, he is very old-fashioned and a very sweet and simple man. I've never seen him lie or make up stories, no matter what the reason. I know for sure that this is true. Plus, he has nothing to gain by lying about this. When the US invaded Afghanistan in 2001, Dad joined the army. He was one of the first soldiers to be sent there. Even back then, the police were not all that much better than they are now. Terrorism, poverty, and corruption tore the country to pieces. It was no picnic for the people who lived there or the soldiers who worked there. Even without the bombings and terrorist attacks, every day was filled with murders, robberies, hunger, and a general feeling of fear among the public. The general public had almost no job opportunities, even though they were afraid of military people almost as much as they were afraid of terrorists. People, even children, would sometimes come to the troops to beg. Back then, life was all about staying alive. The whole thing was heartbreaking, but the fact that it was communist made it seem normal. The tragedy that goes on for a long time has effects that are worse than what caused it. That's what my dad always said. I finally understand what he said after all these years. These soldiers were told to be on the lookout for terrorists 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They were also told to find out who was hiding among them as a citizen. When they had the chance, they attacked the military men. The risk of being attacked was at an all-time high for all US personnel. My father was given clear instructions: stay together, patrol often, and kill whenever you think you might need to. On that night, as he and his fellow soldiers drove around Gotham City in the Third World in their superior utility vehicle, they saw something strange. They were driving their usual route through a pretty empty area when they saw two people in the distance. It was my dad and the soldiers getting ready to shoot. As the car got closer, though, they saw that the figures were actually kids. The car stopped near them, and since then, they had been looking in its direction. They were now in sight. They were both girls, and neither of them could have been older than 7. The fact that they were in the middle of nowhere really scared the soldiers. They thought they might have walked into a trap. Before stopping the car, the lieutenant decided to just report where they were. My dad was the one who went up to the kids. He kept his gun at the ready on his side, so he had no choice but to put it there and walk toward them. As he got closer, he started to feel weird and scared. During this time, if you were a soldier in Afghanistan, they would have always been scared and on edge. But this was different. It happened right away. Even though they are scared, that group skips and jumps with every step. He walked until he was right next to the kids. Then he asked them what they were doing in such a dangerous place. At this time, the kids answered, but they didn't get it right. A perfect match. They got lost when they tried to find their parents. At this point, my dad's legs were already shaking. He seemed to have no power over them. They were doing things on their own. Even though he wasn't completely afraid yet, his legs wouldn't stay strong. A few seconds later, another soldier came over from the side, and his dad noticed that he hadn't said anything since his first question. As he opened his mouth to say something, he looked over at their eyes. In the dark, the scattered light from the headlamps lit up their faces and showed that their eyes were as black as a shark's, solid black. There was no clear line between the pupil and the iris. From the corner of the right girl's eye, he could see the tiniest drop of blood trying to move down her cheek. Dad took a step back and fell on his side because his legs were shaking. This is the first sign that something is wrong. The other soldier probably thought a sniper was coming after them, so it jumped for cover. He tried to tell them to look at their eyes, but nothing came out of his mouth. The last thing he said was that he can remember things from before he passed out. He didn't fully wake up until the next evening, when he woke up in a medical ward after being asked. Dad found out that he had just passed out, and by the time other soldiers carried him to the car, they made sure there were no other attackers nearby who could have hurt him. These children disappeared as if by magic. Even though he was a very skilled doctor, he was never able to figure out why he had passed out, so he just assumed it was a case of acute dehydration. My father and the other soldiers never saw those kids again, and my father says they were not human and had some kind of power over him that made them do things to his body. He was really scared. He said that as soon as he looked into their eyes, a deep, natural fear took over him. Even during a firefight, he's never thought that, other than their eyes, there was anything else about them that was scary enough to draw you in. But meeting them really shook up my father for some reason. My name is John, and I'm 31 years old and in the military right now. I grew up in Pittsburgh and just moved back after a tour of duty overseas. For my story, about 6 months ago, in late November or early December, 3 of my friends and I decided to take a 2-hour drive to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to try to find the mysterious Mothman, since I grew up not far from there. The trip brought back a lot of memories for me, but none of us knew how much this one trip would change us all. It started in my friend's van. We were about halfway there when the van just stopped running. There was no warning, no lights came on, nothing. And we came to a stop in the middle of the highway. Luckily, it was still light out. There wasn't much traffic, so we were able to get out and check under the hood without getting hit by a car or anything. When we were done looking at everything, we saw that the car's battery was completely dead. We had no idea what could be wrong. Everything else seemed to be working fine inside the engine. After letting it sit for a while, we tried everything we could think of until the car started up again by chance. No problems. I know what you're thinking right now. Why did you care so much about whether or not the car would start back up after you let it rest? Well, We had a bad feeling that the car's battery being drained and all of its electronic parts being broken could have been caused by something supernatural. The car turned off just as we were getting closer to Point Pleasant, which is where people say they see the Mothman the most. I know this sounds crazy, but it's the only thing I can think of to explain it. After that first scare, we turned on some music and got back on the road. The rest of the trip went pretty smoothly, and right in front of us, a deer ran across the road. Out of nowhere, we had to slam on the brakes before this deer jumped high into the air, almost glided, and disappeared. It blew all of our minds. We didn't know how to explain it. Later, when we finally got to Point Pleasant, we stopped at a small diner to eat before going up to an old TNT plant to try to find the Mothman. While we were eating dinner, I noticed something. In the corner of my eye, I could see these bright lights. I was scared when I realized that the light I was seeing was the same light I had seen before. I couldn't figure out what it was anymore. So I tried to forget about it. After we left the diner and went to the old TNT plant, we didn't find much there, either, until we were kind of far away. At dusk, we could see this huge figure in the sky. It looked like something from an episode of The X-Files. As we stood there in shock, I was sure I saw bright red eyes staring blankly at us. This wasn't just something I saw. After taking a better look, I realized this was the Mothman, and it looked just like everyone thinks it does. Large bat-like wings and red eyes. It looked so much more real than any other time I've heard of them being seen. I'm still very scared after seeing it for real. After we got over how shocking it was to see this thing for the first time, we decided to get a hotel and go back first thing in the morning. All of this was too much of a shock. And when we got back to Pittsburgh, the next morning, we still didn't know what was going on. When we woke up and went outside, the battery in our car was dead again. We were so confused because there was nothing else nearby that could have caused a power surge like this, let alone messed up our car's electronics. It was weird. We didn't know what to think, but I'll tell you one thing, I'm never going back to Point Pleasant. Even though I was in the military, I don't feel like I was prepared for a situation like this. We were only able to get out of there alive because Mothman was kind enough to let us go, or so I think. I know this sounds crazy, but I'm not making it up. I'm a Navy pilot who is 25 years old and based in North Carolina. My town is a small one in the south. It is near Research Triangle Park. My story starts on a Saturday night, around 11:30 p.m., last fall, in 2013. I was walking out of work to my truck when I saw what looked like a big owl flying above. I saw the owl sitting on the power lines. At first, I didn't think it was anything out of the ordinary, but because it was dark and nighttime, I couldn't help but think it looked bigger than usual. It also seemed like maybe it didn't look right. Its head didn't look like that of an owl, but more like something big and flat, almost like a pterodactyl, if I may say so. Now, as it moved and spread its wings, I'm not making this up. I've never seen anything that looked more like a dinosaur. I watched it fly for about 3 seconds, and if that wasn't a pterodactyl, I don't know what it was. This is really making me question everything I thought I knew. I lost sight of it when it went behind some pine trees, but not before I asked myself, what just happened? I stood there for a few more seconds thinking about whether or not I should go back and take another look to see where it went, but I decided not to. It is hard to say why. But as soon as I lost sight of it, I felt sick to my stomach and shivered all over. At first, I didn't know why, but the longer I stood there, the more I thought something was wrong. I got in my truck and drove back to my house. After about 5 minutes of driving in the dark on the dirt road, nothing happened. I saw it again from afar, and it was much bigger than I had thought at first. You could see it very well. It seemed strange. Not like a giant owl, which is what I first thought, and this made me even more sure it was a pterodactyl. It looked very dinosaur-looking look. I don't know what lives out here, but since it's mostly thick swamps, I doubt it's any kind of owl. So it could have been there for a while. But how has it been going on for so long without anyone noticing? I'm not sure if I'm lucky or not. I won't have to look at it ever again. I remember a time when we met when I was in the Navy, and a Navy officer. A lot of the officers, including me, were scared by what we saw. We had been on other trips, but none of them made us feel as scared and worried as this one did. I was doing my duty on the USS Legend, a warship of the destroyer class that has the most modern weapons. The ship was full of smart people. Officers came from the US and other countries, so most of the time things went smoothly, even though there were a few times when things almost went wrong. We were close to the Bermuda Triangle, which is also known as the Devil's Triangle, because we were on a mission there. As usual, we had finished our mission well because our crew worked well together. We were having a good time talking and congratulating each other on a job well done. The thing happened at that time. The sensors and radars on the ship were going crazy. It kept telling us that there was something wrong with the way we were going. All of the officers were confused. We couldn't make out anything. While we were in a panic, it looked like a portal opened up in the distance. It was beating and moving in a strange way that made me think of a heart beating. At that time, I had a strange thought. What if this doorway led to the heart of a magical being? I shook my head to get rid of the crazy thought and tried to pay attention to what was in front of us. When the captain sensed danger, he gave the order to turn around right away. At the exact same time that the ship's power went out, a portal that had been dormant for a long time suddenly opened. It had a strong pull on the object. So many people came out to vote. It pulled our ship into the portal right away. Despite our resistance, it felt like hell to go through the portal. On every side, there was darkness. The ship we were on turned, flipped, and rolled. There were flashing emergency lights and loud alarms. Even just staying on your feet took a lot of strength and stamina. When the ship stopped going down, everyone could breathe a sigh of relief. To our surprise, we were out at sea. Even though there were no longer any familiar seas, it was clear that everyone was worried, upset, and afraid of the unknown. We tried to talk to them, but nothing worked. At that moment, we knew we were not where we thought we were. No one could get to the outside world. Outside, there was a lot of commotion going on in our HQ because our ship had gone missing. They had been keeping track of our movements and now we were gone without a trace. It caused a big stir, and an investigation was started right away. Other ships close to us were told to move toward the last place we were seen. They had been told to look for any signs. At the same time, we were in a bad spot on all sides of the portal. Strange people like creatures were coming out of the water, and they were all hostile and attacking the ship. This felt like a scene from a movie or an X-Files episode. When the captain fought back against these hordes of beings, he had a serious look on his face. We thought that these things were bad enough. But our worst nightmares had just begun. It was like this for days. All of us were going crazy. Trauma on its own was too much to bear. Then, on the fifth day, something worse happened, and our troubles started. Officers started acting strangely, almost as if they were under hypnosis, and they turned on each other. Several officers were killing each other like they were going crazy. A lot of her crew went crazy and hurt themselves by throwing themselves off the ship or stabbing themselves. And the majority of our officers died. We kept fighting to stay alive, trying to find a way out, trying to find a way home. We were running out of ammunition because each thing we fought was getting stronger. Between that and the fact that their food supplies were running out and they were going crazy. Our ship was now badly damaged and needed to be fixed right away. We wouldn't be around for long. The computers thought that the ship could keep going for another 4 days before all of the engines stopped working. The weight of that news was like a rock on our hearts. Besides that, our GPS didn't do much of anything. We didn't know where we were because we couldn't see land. If we didn't find a way out in 4 days, we were going to die. At this point, we had lost a lot of people from our crew, which used to have more than 300 members but now had less than 70 people. We were overworked because each of us had to fill in for an empty post. We were so tired that our faces were starting to show signs of going crazy. They didn't have enough food, and were being attacked by strange creatures that came up from the sea. The ship and its crew were now only a shadow of what they used to be. If we didn't find a way out, the USS Legend would become its own legend, and we would all die with it. But 3 days went by in a flash, and we still couldn't find a way out. The ship was getting less and less useful. Schilling thought it was clear that it was getting close to the end and would soon die. Some of us were definitely willing to die with the ship, but others were scared of the idea of drowning. We moved slowly and kept praying for a way out of this crazy world. Lady Luck seemed to be on our side, and we were able to find a way out. We went back the way we came and were pulled back into the world we knew. With only 52 people left, the whole ship. We were asked a lot of questions about everything that happened to us and to the crew. Many of us were forced to sign papers that would keep us quiet for the rest of our lives. Many of us were also given time off, and any evidence of what had happened was quickly destroyed so that no one would find out. A few other people from this trip have also tried to get their message out to the public. Let's just say that they were quickly shut up before any real news could get out. I'm at the end of my rope right now because I have stage 4 colon cancer. I haven't got much time. I thought that the best thing to do would be to write down my ideas, print this out, and send it to as many people I know as possible. Suppose this is made up, if you want to. But I'm here to tell the truth about the secrets and plots that the military and government have been keeping hidden. So much time. I've got nothing to lose. I'm already dying, and I don't have much time left anyway. If nothing else, I hope this helps you see through the lies and tricks that people are always telling you. Good luck and Godspeed. It's not easy to tell this story. As I tried to explain to people who grew up in strict Catholic families. How, as a military officer, I saw this happen. It happened a little more than 7 years ago, but I still get goosebumps when I think about it. It makes me wonder if the impossible is possible. I've never given UFOs much thought. I just thought they were another way for people to get attention. I've always thought that. I've been in the army before, and I've been out in the field before. I joined the army when I was 19 years old. This isn't something that just happened last week. Here's what went down. It was like any other night. As usual, we were on patrol, but there wasn't much going on, so we were pretty bored. We were suddenly told to keep patrolling and move down the road until we met another unit and switched patrol routes. I've always liked working alone, so I wouldn't want to do this, but it's the way things have to be done. So, we got in the car and started driving. Everything was fine until we passed a lookout. When I looked out to the horizon, I saw this thing. We can't make a mistake about this. We both saw it plain to stay, and there was no way to explain what we were seeing. A figure the size of a person was flying above us like any sane person would. I'm sure I must have been hallucinating. We looked at each other to make sure we weren't dreaming. It was not a bird, for sure. It looked like a faint outline of a person floating in the sky. It almost looked like it had a cape, a helmet, or some other strange thing. It was the strangest and scariest thing I had ever seen. It was kind of floating there in the sky, moving slowly. We didn't know what to think about it. We went to the radio, and told the other unit what had happened. They looked at it and agreed it was real. We followed it as we slowly got closer to each other, and there was no doubt it was real. After I looked at it for a while, it seemed to just vanish into thin air, as if it had never been there. It was almost as if it had broken up like a cloud, which didn't make much sense to me. But after thinking about it for a while, maybe it was just a change in the weather. I'm not sure. I don't know if anyone will believe me, but we all tried. I can't see anything else because my bosses won't let me. We aren't even supposed to or allowed to talk about this. I'm in the military, and since the first day I joined, I've been stationed here in San Diego for about 3 months. Strange but interesting stories have been told to me by shipmates and friends who also live out here. It's clear that stories never prove anything. They are just what people say. But they've made me realize that what they said probably has some truth to it. My roommate and I went outside for a smoke break about a year ago. We were hanging out in a room and watching TV at midnight. We were both smoking cigarettes, so we decided to walk outside the barracks instead of going to one of the places where people are supposed to smoke. We both walked to one side of the building, away from the main road, where many of our shipmates also walked to one of the designated smoking areas. We looked far away to see where one of its lights came from, mostly because it seemed to be so low in the sky, and we'd been talking about it the whole time, trying to figure out what it could have been. After a few seconds, we saw what looked like another light moving slowly away from us. At first, we thought it was an airplane or maybe a drone. After looking at it for a few more seconds, we realized that this light wasn't moving like an airplane would. We finally decided to tell our other ship what we'd seen. We told some friends who were sleeping in the barracks, but we both knew they wouldn't believe us. We woke them both up and told them what we thought we had seen. And, to our surprise, all 3 of us agreed that for an airplane, it was moving at a very strange speed. We watched this thing slowly move across the sky for 2 hours. As time went on, it got lower and lower until it finally went out of sight. We were walking toward the shape of the hills in the distance, but as we got closer, we thought it had completely disappeared. There was no sign of anything, so we all agreed that it must have been some kind of strange weather or maybe an unknown plane flying over us. I don't know if anyone else saw what we saw, but I would guess that they did. I really don't know though. When we were marching to the dining hall the next morning. Last night, my roommate and her friend said they saw a blue light or some other strange thing in the sky. We told them what we saw, and he just said, "Yeah, I saw that too." I had heard that they were testing a secret craft. I know that sounds crazy, and it's possible that he was just messing with us. But everyone we told believes what we said. Even though we never talked about the ship that went off into the distance after that day. I no longer really thought about it. But I did try to do some research, and the stories I read always seemed to end with something bad. Like people being taken away or going missing. I hope nothing strange comes up. Still, I kind of wish something would happen. If it's the military doing some kind of test flight, I hope they won't do it without telling us what's going on. I don't know if this is one of the strange things people hear about out here, but I don't think it was normal, so I thought it was best to tell everyone what happened in case it was worth looking into. I'd always wanted to join the nurse corps of the US Navy. I loved being a nurse. I got into the program, but before I could join the Navy officially, they told me I had to do a hospital rotation and train at Naval Hospital Pensacola to get experience. Before I say anything else, you may have heard that the land where Naval Hospital Pensacola was built was used as a field hospital during World War II. It had been years since that building was built, and I had been working all-day shifts and getting only 3 or 4 hours of sleep if I was lucky. It was physically hard and very tiring. But I liked how busy it was and how tired I was at the end of the day. Because of COVID, the hospital started letting in more people, and shifts got longer even though there were less nurses. A crazy number of people are going to the hospital for all kinds of care. I was in the children's ward taking a look at a baby who was brought in with severe pneumonia and a weak immune system. The baby was no more than 25 months old. I heard the baby crying and sucking for air. It hurt me so much. I called the doctor while taking the stethoscope off my neck and feeling around for the baby's lungs. They were quickly getting full of fluid. I knew that thoracynthesis would temporarily ease the baby's pain until a doctor could check him out properly. Thoracynthesis is the process of making a hole with a needle to drain fluid and make it easier to breathe. I got a clean needle and just looked at the baby as his cries got harder and harder to make out. I had never done it before. I didn't want to make things worse, so I wasn't sure what to do. Just then, I saw a senior nurse running toward me. I thought it was just my glasses because she looked strange, like she was pale and had a light glow around her. She took the needle right out of my hands and did the procedure to drain the fluid from the baby. I saw the tag on our uniform as well. The name was Nurse May. I didn't move because she did everything so calmly. It seemed strange to me. I didn't know her because I'd never seen her before, and her hair and clothes seemed out of date. I told her I was grateful and didn't know what to do next. If she hadn't helped me, I would have messed it up for sure. She looked at me, gave me a small smile, and said she was happy to help and that it just takes practice. Then, as soon as she opened the door, she started walking out of the children's section. The doctors and a few other nurses all ran into the room. They were out of breath, and the strangest thing was that they ran right through her. She was right there, but they didn't see her. I couldn't stop looking at Nurse May as she walked away and out of sight. The doctor startled me and brought me back to the present. They saw that the procedure was done and that it was done right. They liked it straight away. I told them I hadn't done it, though. When I told them it was Nurse May, they asked who did it. Everyone looked both at me and at each other. No one by the name of Nurse May was known to work in that area as a doctor or nurse. They seemed puzzled and lost. Anyway, the whole talk was about them. After a few days, I had some time to myself. I went to the records office and started to look for the list of nurses. The one I found was from 1959. With the name May. Howell had passed away in January 1961. Am I hallucinating, losing my sanity? We're going crazy, or the ghost of an old nurse has passed through. Come help me save the life of a baby. I'm in the army right now. I am 24 years old right now. I was also raised with a lot of faith. My dad is a pastor, and now I'll tell you about me. I'm very much into hiking, camping and kayaking. Well, anything that has to do with the outdoors. Alex and I love to go out and find new places to visit. Find out how far we can hike in a day. We just made a map of one of our favorite hikes, which goes through parts of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. Today, we tried to go on the hike because we thought the weather would be nice. But there is also a lot of smoke from some of the fires, so visibility was a bit less than perfect. I guess you get what you deserve. Since we always started at the same place, we are trying to go hiking in August. We had just run 1 mile, but we still had a long way to go. This track was going to be a few miles long, and it would take us 2 weeks to finish it. As we walked, I was really drawn to this one spot for some reason. I don't know how to explain it. Alex, the view was beautiful, though. At this point, my friend stopped me to take in the view. And all of a sudden, he saw movement between 2 bushes about 50 feet away. We weren't too worried because there are usually a lot of deer around here, but what we saw was definitely not a deer. It was a very strange thing. The first thing I noticed was that it was pale white and kind of hobbled around on 2 legs, but was more like crawling on all 4s. It looked very strange. I couldn't see any eyes or facial features at first, but it moved very strangely, almost like it was slithering, but on all 4s, if that's a good way to describe it. I was both mesmerized and scared by how strange it looked. It was one of those things that made me both amazed and sick. We were standing there, and it seemed to notice us. After a few seconds, it turned its head right toward us and looked at us with a very curious look on its face. The next thing I knew, it was running away faster than anything I'd ever seen, probably around 30 miles per hour. It was gone in a very short time. I don't know what we saw that day, but whatever it was, as someone who doesn't know much about the supernatural, I'll never forget it. What we saw is pretty amazing. It makes no sense, and I'm going crazy trying to figure out what it was. We know what we saw, and we also know it wasn't from this world. I'm in the National Guard and am 29 years old. When I can, I like to be very active. I think it's very, very important to keep up my strength and health. This weekend, keeping this machine running and eating well were just as important. I was at the beach for a bachelor party for a friend. It was somewhere around 1 a.m. We decided to go for a quiet walk along the shore near a campground. We were walking in the quiet night air when all of a sudden, something started moving quickly towards us. About 30 feet away, it stopped. Started making these strange yells, screeches, and roars right away. It almost sounded like an insect clicking its tongue against its abdomen, or like some other strange sound I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was a sound with a very high pitch. It sounded like the kind of noise you'd expect to hear. Something like a big bug instead of a person or animal, like a big insect. All of us were pretty shocked. We stood there and looked, and then we heard another piercing scream, followed by the sound of something big moving through the trees and going back the way it came. So far, that's all I really have to say. But anyone who has questions is welcome to ask. They are going to go on vacation with me next week. So, if I find out more, I'll post it as soon as I can. On my campus, no one else saw this. It was about 1 AM, after everyone had gone to sleep. One of my friends who was also in the military and I talked. He thinks he saw either a Sasquatch or maybe a mantis-like humanoid. I tried to look up the strange sound on the internet, but I couldn't find anything useful or any mention of this kind of creature anywhere in the world. I'll keep looking, and I hope someone knows something about it. I was just a trooper at the Oklahoma City bombing memorial for a while, and my job was to do patrols. This was before I was sent somewhere else to do something different. On one of the days I worked there, this happened. A little after 2 AM, it was nighttime, and I started to feel a cold breeze that made me shiver. Even though it was 89 degrees Fahrenheit, and a pretty normal night, it was strange. I didn't give it much thought. The thing that really caught my attention was the way everyone was humming together. It made me feel like something was wrong. The sound of the humming was just loud enough to make you feel unsteady and nervous. It started to get louder and seemed to be coming from a certain spot around the building. I was at the front of the line at the time. The memorial ground is on the back. When I paid attention to it, it sounded like a group of men humming. It came to me that it seemed to be a song or something. That's what I thought it meant. This machine's humming had a melody and a rhythm, but they were very faint. It was enough to make the place feel very scary. I stood still and tried to figure out where the sound was coming from, but I couldn't. Even though I couldn't figure out where to go. I just kept looking at the building, hoping that someone else would tell me what was going on and that I wasn't the only one who was going crazy here. After some time, all of the buzzing stopped. Even though it would be easy to hear this and think it was just construction work, there was no sound, no singing, no growling, nothing. Or there might have been work going on underground, but it didn't sound like that. It was very loud, like a building site was right next door. But there was no construction going on near where I was, and if there had been at the level of noise we had heard, it would have been very clear and easy to see. It didn't sound like it was far away, it sounded like it was nearby. The humming sounded like two pieces of metal grinding really hard against each other, making a strange, dissonant melody. During my whole life, I've never been through anything like that before, and I haven't since. This was a very scary thing to happen. I have always lived in Kentucky. I am a base security officer for the US military. I'm young and fairly new to this job, so it's possible that I missed something obvious during training. However, saying things like what I'm about to say can make it hard to sleep. Yesterday, I got off work around 10:30 p.m. and was on my way home when I saw a strange set of lights in the sky. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, and the stars were bright and clear. Then, out of nowhere, these 4 bright lights showed up. They were golden yellow, like a ball, and looked almost exactly like how some machines light up. I stopped my car so I could see it better. It looked like it was coming right at me. The light formation kept getting bigger until it almost looked like a huge bat-like creature was coming out of the light. This thing was at least 10 feet long, and it left a light trail behind it that went for at least 250 feet, if not more. These numbers are just rough guesses. I tried to find something to compare it to, but it was all new to me. Impossible. Its wings looked like bat wings, and it flew with a grace I've never seen in any other animal. This thing flew around the area for a while before going away into the night sky. The thing's head looked like a human's, but it was covered in fur. The body was more like a big bat. It had 4 arms and very large, leathery wings. The eyes were small and set far back in the head. It seemed very dangerous. This beast that had this bright, scary light coming from it. Everything about it was so strange and strange. Since it happened, I've been very scared and haven't been able to sleep because I can't stop thinking about what happened. I don't know what it is. I really want to know more about this thing so I can figure out what it looked like. I know this sounds crazy, but I swear on my life that it happened. I don't know if this was a top-secret military project, but I and a few other people have never seen anything like it. Only a few people, like me, even tried. I can see why they'd want to keep this quiet. Maybe, just maybe, we did see an alien or something that looked like an alien. Even though I've read a lot of UFO stories, I've never heard of anything or anyone who saw a UFO or a ball of light change into a real creature. But the situation really scared me, even as I tried to figure out what was going on. I was a member of a combat engineer unit for 9 years. During that time, I did many different jobs all over the world. I've seen a lot of scary things in my life, and it's not hard to believe what I say. I got out in 2010, and now I work for the government as a contractor. Back in 2009, this happened during a normal training mission. We were way out in the middle of nowhere, and we were mostly just practicing patrolling. This also happened in Mississippi. When we saw it standing there and staring at us, our team had split off from the rest to try to get around the hillside. It was probably about 7 feet tall, had dark gray hair all over, and had dark red eyes that looked like they were glowing in the dark. It looked like a wolf, but its teeth were too sharp and long for it to be a normal animal. It also had big, pointed ears, and its eyes never closed. Not even once. I remember telling my team to split up and run in all different directions. As soon as we saw each other, it came at us. I know for sure that we got rid of it. One of my guys shot his M4 carbine about 6 times, and it fell but quickly got back up. It came back at him and shot about 6 more rounds into the sting's chest and 2 more into its head, killing it. He told me later that each bullet didn't feel like it was doing much. Even though this was a very scary event for me and my team as a whole, we all met up at the rendezvous point and didn't tell anyone about it. I don't know what this thing was, but it made me feel very scared. I think this thing was a dogman. As I said before, I don't know much about the supernatural, so it's hard for me to say for sure what it was, but now that I know more, I think it was a dogman. It has every quality written all over it. And after everything we've seen and done in our time of service, we can't think of anything else it could be. I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and where I come from. I'm 67 years old, and in Vietnam I was a sniper. I have lived in the Midwest for almost all of my life. I got out of the military since then. I have a degree in engineering and have worked hard for the military all my life. Since I got out of the army, I've done well enough for myself that I've never had to work again. My dad was an abusive alcoholic who only married my mom when she got pregnant with me. He was also in the military, and when he got out, he moved back to the Midwest where he grew up. My mother raised me until I was 18 years old. She is still alive at 95 and lives in a nursing home in the next state over, which is close enough for her to visit about once a month. I'm telling you this because I'm tough because of how I was raised. It helped me deal with the hard times I would face in the military and in Vietnam. Now let's get to the story and talk about how funny it was to think of a dogman. But after what I saw, I'm not sure my wife is as sure as she used to be. I was walking my dog near my house late at night when I heard strange noises. This is a common thing. We do live in the country, but as I got closer to see where the noise was coming from, it stopped and then started again about 100 yards away. Now that the noise is much louder, I think something is going on. Just as I get closer again, this thing comes out from behind the trees and runs down the hill on all fours away from me. It was by far the biggest black wolf I had ever seen. I'm not sure what else it could be, besides a strange dog or something like that. That doesn't seem likely, but it could have been too big to be a normal-sized wolf. I can tell you for sure that I'm not crazy or hallucinating. This thing was at least as big as a wolf, so it couldn't be one. I've never seen a black wolf that big before, and it couldn't have been a lost dog. This thing was easily the size of a moose, and I'm not kidding. I wanted to tell you a story in the hopes that it might help other people believe that these things are real. My wife is very worried that they are fakes. After all, every member of her family has met Dogman. So, here we are in the middle of the country, in Michigan, and all around Wisconsin. She believes they are real. She doesn't understand why. But I guess I'm coming out of denial now that all this has happened. This is what we've found. It might not be very interesting, but I'm glad you let me tell you anyway.